fighter that UFC president Dana White called a scary son of a bitch, and I don't mean fighter-wise. I'm of course talking about the legendary Lee Lights Out Murray. Lee Murray was born Lee Braham Murray Lamrani on the 12th of November 1977 in Greenwich, London, England. He was born to a Moroccan father and an English mother. Murray attended Foxfield Primary School where he met his future wife, Sibylle Rowlings, 3 years his junior. Murray's closest associates at this point were boys from Buttmarsh and the surrounding estates who called themselves the Buttmarsh Boys. Described as happy kids who used to play like normal kids in the estate, the boys fought to establish an internal pecking order and believed they had a duty to look after Buttersmarsh, sometimes engaging in fights with boys from neighbouring estates. A skinny youngster, Murray's preferred method of attack was running into battle, windmilling his arms around his head with a manic expression on his face, a manoeuvre which, combined with his protruding ears, earned him the nickname of Alien, which he hated. Murray had a difficult relationship with his father, who was often drunk and described as a frightening, violent man who was volatile and demurring. Largely absent from the first 7 years of his life, Brahim demanded his respect and obedience to the point of a police warning for mistreatment. Eventually, Lee began to fight back against his father. The next-door neighbour heard that Brahim actually went and hit Lee, and Lee snapped. Just turned around and knocked his dad clean out. Once he realised he could take down a big man like that, I think that's what changed Lee into the man he is now, a thug. Their relationship grew so tempestuous that Brahim felt living together would result in a death, so he moved out. Barbara was then left to raise Lee and Rikika, Lee's only sibling, largely on her own. At this time, Lee began attending Eaglesfield Boys' School, which is where he met his eventual best friend and partner in crime, Paul Allen. Murray, who enjoyed reading and puzzles, was a subpar student, mainly doing well in football, failing to make the school team. Teachers found him unmanageable. He was expelled and found enrollment at Woolwich Polytechnic School to complete the stationary years of school. By then, Lee Murray was living on the streets and was a member of a gang based on the Barnfield estate, with stealing and drug dealing a part of everyday activity. He and his friends were allegedly in daily contact with Nigerian drug dealers who operated at Plumstead train station. An eventual turf war broke out that saw Murray and his friends win a local territory in drug trading. Murray was eventually convicted of possession of cocaine and cannabis and was named in the Old Bailey as a notorious London drug dealer who employed Paul Allen as his right-hand man, plus a network of drug runners. One of his best friends from the time was a local ruffian and future mixed martial artist named Mark the Beast Epstein. What a last name to have, eh? Who claimed that he and Lee sold crack cocaine and Lee made a lot of money from that. Murray also proved himself adept at the more violent side of selling drugs, typically to control territory and make sure customers pay. Murray himself claimed that some people would probably say I was a bully, but a bully to me is someone that goes for easy targets and people who can't fight back. Me, I went for all targets. Murray was known for punching people almost at random in the street, as well as habitually harassing a man who ran a local corner shop. Murray was sentenced to a term at Feltham Young Offenders Institution, the first of his contumacious sentences, for what ranked as his more minor offences such as assault and thievery. Others followed in Dover and Norwich. Upon emerging from Feltham, Murray devoted energy to the gym, lifting weights and drinking weight gains shakes to add bulk to his lanky 6-foot frame. Joining him was Allen, who by then was known as the Enforcer, presumably from drug dealing activity. Murray and Allen were soon using steroids and spending the money they earned from selling drugs on luxury cars. The police stopped Murray regularly and because they suspected he was a drug dealer, attempted to place an informer in his gang, but could not gain enough evidence to prosecute Murray. He was conspicuous of the police, often mocking and intimidating them on the street, sometimes following officers around in his car. Some officers at Plumstead police station told his biographer. Others felt wary it would be best not to aggravate him and added, "He's a very dangerous man." Rowlings, Murray's girlfriend, gave birth to their first child, Lily Jane, on the 24th of December 1998. Weeks later, Murray was caught up on a turf war with rival drug dealers that led to the arrest of Epstein and more than a dozen others, many ending up in prison. Murray, however, got clean away with Epstein saying that he was the only one that slipped through the net. I mean, lucky boy, but he's always been lucky. I went to prison for 3 years. Murray married Rawlings on the 24th of November 2000, listing himself on the wedding certificate as a professional fighter. Murray would later divorce Rawlings in 2008 while incarcerated in Morocco, which we will get to. Shortly after dodging arrest, Murray was introduced to mixed martial arts and he competed in his first fight on the 5th of December 1999 at an event called Millennium Brawl that was held at Hemel Hempstead Pavilion. His opponent was Rob Hudson and Murray knocked him out in the first round, prompting event promoter Andy Jardine to say he was so quick they called him Lightning Lee Murray. Murray's successful debut led him to begin training seriously. He jogged around the Abbey Wood estate and attended 2 gyms, London Shoot Fighters in White City for wrestling and Peacock's Gym in Canning Town for boxing. Martin Bauer, who ran Peacock's with his brothers Tony and Paul, described Murray as a very nice boy who conducted himself well. Bauer said that Murray reminded him of many other young men who had seen in his gym over the years, men who had come from troubled backgrounds but whose lives were given structure by the sport. At the same time that Murray was training at Peacock's gym, the Bauer brothers were planning a series of robberies, the biggest being a brazen raid on a high-security warehouse at Gatwick Airport. Their schemes involved disguising themselves as security officers using a fake brisk Matt van to get into the depot and then stealing $1 million in foreign currency. After Scotland Yard found out about the planned heist, all 3 brothers were arrested and jailed. It has been speculated that while Murray had no prior knowledge about the caper, the schematics that were later revealed publicly may have given him some of the ideas that were used in the similar security depot robberies. Murray had 4 professional bouts in 2000. The first was a 12-match encounter with Mike Thomason under the banner of Ring of the Truth. Murray won the fight via Kimura submission in the first round, but it was in February 2004 that he would expand on some of the events surrounding the fight, writing on a message board in a now archived thread from the mixed martial arts website Sherdog. Murray told the story of watching the Prince Nazim Hamid vs. Vuni Bungu fight at a pub the night before his own match with Thomason, when a patron stood in front of Murray and then accused him of stealing his seat after being asked to move. Murray allegedly knocked the man and his friend who attempted to aid him unconscious, followed by knee strikes to knock out a bartender who rushed to break up the fight. The following morning and the day of his fight with Tomlinson, Murray was unable to close his left hand. After taping the hand, Murray relied solely on his good right hand, stating that he caught him with a few good rights. He was rocked, so he took him down. Then I caught him in a key lock on the ground and won the fight. After that, I went to the hospital and got my hand plastered up. It was broken 2 places. Murray's next 2 bouts took place on the 17th of June 2000 in a tournament fought at Extreme Challenge 34. Murray defeated his first opponent, Chris Albedea, by ankle lock in the first round. Murray later said that he thought Albedea was a kickboxer because he was wearing tie shorts, so he started the fight with leg kicks. When Albedea surprised Murray by performing a single-leg takedown, Murray said he sprawled and took him to the side of the cage where I was kneeing him and punching him constantly. He dropped again and took me down, going for a leg lock, so I grabbed his leg and went to trade leg locks with him. I cranked an Achilles lock on, and I think it must have snapped because there was a real loud crack. Even Pat heard it in my corner. And when Chris got up, he couldn't put weight on it, so I won that one. The victory advanced Murray to the second round of the tournament, but he lost by armbar to Canadian submission specialist Joe Dawkinson in the opening round. Murray said that when he went into the final, I was so happy and excited about winning the first, I just sort of lost my focus. Joe's a BJJ Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy who's only ever lost to Matt Hughes and Eugene Jackson. Anyway, he just took me straight to the ground. I didn't even make him pay while he tried. He launched a free sub attack at me with his guard. I fended off 2 and then got submitted with a key lock. I learnt a lot from that fight. Murray's next fight was just weeks later. A 9th of July contest against Danny Rushton, a fighter who had gained a reputation for his toughness due to competing in a true no-holds-barred competition in Russia. The match ended up a no contest, however, after Rushton collapsed in the first due to exhaustion, which is really weird. You'd think it would have been a Lee Murray TKO, but I guess back in the day, the commissions are a bit weird. But anyway, at some point in 2000, Murray traveled to Battendorf, Iowa to train at the renowned Miletich Fighting Systems camp, run by former UFC welterweight champion Pat Miletich. In an interview conducted before the Rushton fight, Murray stated that while at MFS, he trained a hell of a lot of groundwork and a lot of kickboxing too. I prefer stand-up. Well, I just prefer to strike, really. I like to keep the fight standing and punch you. Mind you, I like to punch from the mount too. I like to strike. On the 11th of March 2001, Murray fought to a draw against Chris Bacon at Millennium Brawl 2, Capital Punishment. He followed it up with a first-round knockout of Gary Warren at Millennium Brawl 3, Independence Day, on the 1st of July. On the 11th of September 2004, Lee Murray fought future UFC middleweight champion and arguably middleweight GOAT, between him and Adesanya, Anderson Silva, in Cage Rage 8 for the vacant middleweight title. Silva won by unanimous decision. Murray amassed an 8-2 and 1 no contest record in smaller promotions before receiving a contract with the Ultimate Fighting Championship. In his UFC debut, he defeated Jorge Rivera by triangle choke armbar in the first round. This was Murray's only fight in the UFC due to complications with his US visa as a result of ongoing criminal prosecution against him in the UK for assault. After he attacked a man during a road rage incident, Murray was scheduled to fight Patrick Cote at UFC 2, but was replaced by former opponent Joe Dawkinson. This led to Murray signing with the Cage Rage promotion, which was also short-lived due to his injuries resulting from a stabbing, which prevented Murray from continuing his MMA career. Now, a lot of people know about the scuffle Lee Murray had in 2002 with then UFC light heavyweight champion Tito Ortiz outside a nightclub in London at UFC 38. Murray asserts he knocked Ortiz out, a claim substituted by Matt Hughes in his book Made in America, the most dominant champion in UFC history, as well as Pat Miletich during an interview with ESPN, and also the announcer Bruce Buffer in Mike Tyson's Hot Boxing podcast. However, Tito Ortiz denies to this day he was knocked out, claiming that his mate was knocked out and then him and Murray got into a scuffle that was broken up by the police before any damage could really be put off to him, but he claims he landed multiple knees on Lee Murray. Chuck Liddell also has stated that he did not see Tito knocked out cold, but Dana White and many others have agreed with Lee Murray's tale of the story. So it's a lot of it's a lot of he said, she said, but the consensus is that Lee Murray did knock Tito Ortiz out. On the 28th of September 2005, Murray was hospitalised after being stabbed in a brawl during the birthday party of British glamour model Lauren Pope. He suffered a punctured lung and a severed artery. According to the doctor who performed the life-saving surgery on Murray, he was resuscitated 4 times during the operation that saved his life. When thanked, the doctor remarked that Lee should thank the nurses who ran the bags of blood from the blood bank because that's what saved his life. Now, on the 25th of June 2006, in a joint operation with Moroccan police, Lee Murray was arrested in a shopping centre in the Sousse district of the capital Rabat for suspected involvement in the Securitas Depot robbery. Moroccan police said they had to use the specialist techniques to arrest the suspects because they were specialists in martial arts and firearms. Kent police said in a statement that they had been tracking Murray for 3 months and would be seeking his extradition from Morocco. There is no treaty between the UK and Morocco, and the process was expected to take months. Later, Moroccan police revealed that Lee Murray had also been charged with possessions of hard drugs. On the 22nd of June 2006, Kent police confirmed the news of Murray's arrest in London and also stated that over 30 people had been arrested in conjunction with the investigation. Before moving on, I'll mention that lead up to the actual heist itself. The criminal gang began to study the depot with the intention of robbing it. Men later convicted of conspiracy included Paul Allen, Jetmir Papa, Roger Couts, Emir Hazenja, Lee Murray, Stuart Royal, and Leah Russia. Albanians Buka Papa and Hazenja fucking butchering this bad, were childhood friends who met at school in Bajram Kuri. They did not mention this in court, claiming not to know each other at all. Lee Russia and a roofer and cage fighter met Bak Papa, a bouncer, at a mixed martial arts training session run by Russia at the Angel Center near the depot. Russia also knew Lee Murray through MMA. Murray was stopped by Kent police on the 28th of July 2005 while in his car on the road overlooking the depot together with two identified men. As well as being a cage fighter, Murray was also a drug dealer. Hai Sejan signed up with a recruitment agency which supplied workers to Medway House. He was first given a job at Royal Victoria Place Shopping Centre in Royal Tunbridge Wells, and at the end of 2005 offered work at the depot. At his training, he asked questions about security measures and passed the information to Bakpapa, who told Russia. On the 6th of January 2006, mobile phone records displayed at trial indicated that Allen, Couts, Murray, Royal and Russia were present at a meeting at Royal's house. Murray visited a surveillance shop in Derbyshire to buy a spy camera and recording device with the intention of giving it to Hajan, despite warning by the shop owner to be careful not to get glue on the lens of the camera when placing it in position. Someone from the gang did precisely that, so Murray sent his friends Alan and Kane Patterson back to the shop to get it fixed. The shop owner fixed the camera and attached it to a belt, which Hajan used to film inside the depot. On their way back, the men were stopped by Nottinghamshire police for driving at 150 miles per hour. Allen had broken the speed limit while driving on an expired provisionary license and was in a car he did not own, which had no MOT and no insurance, so it was impounded by the police. Several days before the robbery, Murray went clubbing in London and crashed his yellow Ferrari sports car on the New Kent Road the next morning. Murray fled the scene and was arrested by 4 police officers nearby. He was charged with assault in a case that never came to trial when he had abandoned his car. He left behind 2 burner phones containing numbers of other gang members and 3 photographs from the club which showed him associating with Allen and Patterson. The police later recovered these items from the impounded car. Murray had accidentally recorded himself on one of the phones talking to Russia about how to carry out the robbery. In the early morning of Tuesday the 21st of February 2006, Dixon was driving home along the A249 when he was pulled over just outside Stockberry, a village northeast of Maidstone, by what he presumed was an unmarked police car. The Volvo S60 had flashing blue lights in its grille, and one of 2 uniformed officers came to Dixon's window asking him to turn off his engine and leave the keys in the ignition. Breaching protocol, Dixon followed the officer's orders to step out of his car and to sit in the other car where he was handcuffed. His car was moved off the road and the Volvo travelled west on the M20 motorway to the West Malling bypass. The criminals acted driving him to a police station before revealing their deception and threatening him with a gun at Mereworth. He was tied up and transferred into a white van which drove to Elderton Farm near Staplehurst. The 2 men impersonating police officers next drove to Dixon's home in Herne Bay and spoke to Lynn Dixon, telling her that her husband had crashed his car and that she and her son should accompany them to the hospital as quickly as possible. When she got into the car, Lynn Dixon realised it was not a real police car and the men told her she was being abducted. They took her to the farm as well. Colin Dixon was then interrogated about the layout of the depot and warned at gunpoint that the lives of his family members depended on his actions. Around 1 o'clock on Wednesday, the 22nd of February 2006, 3 vehicles headed to the depot. Lynn Dixon and her son were held in the back of a 7.5-ton white Renault Midland lorry. Colin Dixon and the other gang members travelled in a Vauxhall Vectra in the Volvo. The vehicle split up and the Volvo arrived at the depot at 1:21. Dixon and a gang member dressed as a police officer got out of the car and walked towards the pedestrian entrance. Dixon rang the bell and looked through the window at the control room operator. Instead of querying why Dixon was returning at night or why he was with an officer, the inexperienced operator opened the door and let the 2 men through the airlock into the building. The entire robbery was filmed on the building CCTV, and when Kent police later reviewed the footage, They nicknamed this gang member Policeman. Policeman subdued the operator, and without being asked, Dixon pressed the button which opened the gate and allowed the vehicles to enter the yard. The rest of the gang now entered the building. One man was later nicknamed Stopwatch. Some really interesting names here. Because he was wearing a stopwatch. Very creative names too. To time the robbery in an echo of the film Ocean's 11. Others were called Shorty, because I imagine he was short. Hoodie, I imagine because he was wearing a hoodie. And Mr. Average, I imagine because he was of an average build or an average look. Or maybe he had something else that was average. The criminals' faces were hidden by balaclavas, and they were armed with handguns, shotguns, AK-47 assault rifles, and a Scorpion submachine gun. Dixon urged staff to comply with the gang's command, and 14 workers were tied up. Nobody pressed an alarm. The 7 members of the gang attempted to load metal cage full of book notes into the lorry and found they were too heavy. So one criminal tried to drive the Lungsing Lindy power lifter, and the rest shoved the hostages out of the way. It was difficult to maneuver the lifter and the security workers who ordered to drive it when he kept deliberately crashing it. Dixon was told to use a pallet mover. The worker then wedged the power lifter between the tail lift of the truck and the loading bay, rendering it useless. When Dixon pumped the pallet mover up, Hoodie became suspicious and pointed a gun at his head. Frustrated by the slow progress, the other gang members grabbed bundles of money in their hands and filled up shopping trolleys. The criminals stole $52 million in used and unused banknotes, and another £154 million would not fit in the lorry, and they had to leave it behind. In total, they took 17 cages and 3 trolleys full of banknotes. The staff workers were left locked up inside empty cages, as well as Lynn Dixon and her son. No alarm had been set off, and the gang ordered the staff to stay still when they left at 2:44. At 3:15, when they were sure the robbers had gone, the staff triggered an alarm which called the police. The police arrived and began the investigation by interviewing the staff and taking their clothes and their DNA profiles. After Murray fled to Morocco, which is not known how he got there, but he was then charged with the possession of hard drugs in Morocco, and 30 people had been arrested in conjunction with the investigation. In June 2009, Murray attempted to escape Sale Prison. Small swords were found in a plate of biscuits in Murray's cell by another prisoner who broke into it. Prison officials believe Murray was planning to cut through the iron bars of his cell window with the swords to make the escape through the small window easier. Murray had lost a significant amount of weight. Murray was in a different cell at the time as punishment for being caught with a laptop computer with internet access and 5 kilos of drugs. Other prisoners in Sale held it against Murray that he was able to use his money to smuggle in these items, as well as expensive clothes. The fellow prisoner who broke into his cell was doing so to steal some of Murray's belongings. He was convicted of the $53 million crime in a Moroccan court in June 2010. Kent police said Murray must serve 10 years in prison from Morocco for his involvement. This sentence was then extended to 25 years on the 30th of November 2010. On the 2nd of July 2018, Lee Murray was actually interviewed by Bloody Elbow, and this is what he had to say. So Bloody Elbow asked him, "What are 3 things you think about daily?" Murray responds, "Well, the first thing would have to be freedom. Without that, nothing else is possible. The next would be my family, and the third would be fighting again." He was then asked, "How would you describe a typical day in the life of Lee Murray?" At this present time, I can't describe to you what a typical day in my life is, but maybe one day I'll be able to answer that question for you. You'll probably fall back in your chair and say to yourself, "How the fuck did he do it?" He was then asked, "What does he do to pass the time?" "I train, that's all you can do. I train and try to get as fit and strong as possible, so I'm always ready to fight." There have been times where I've been sitting in a room next to people with multiple death sentences, and it's then your problems seem very small. I'm still here to fight another day. He was asked what his favourite film was. There's an ESPN documentary about me on the net, and in this documentary they said my top 3 films were Gotti, Scarface, and The Bank Job. But I'd never ever seen The Bank Job at the time of that documentary, so I don't know where they got that from. I'd have to say Gotti and Scarface are definitely in my top 10, though I can't wait to see the new Gotti film I've heard about with John Travolta playing John Gotti. My top 3 films to date are Heat, Public Enemies, and The Town. I'm sure when they make the film about my life, it will without a doubt be up there with them. I just need Michael Mann to get in touch with me so we can get the ball rolling and make the real Lee Murray story. He was asked what keeps him motivated. I still have that dream of being the UFC champion. That dream will never go. All the time I'm breathing air. The biggest disappointment for me is that dream would have come true if I wasn't in prison. That's the most gutting thing about it. Do you still follow fight sports? He was asked. Yeah, for sure. My family and friends always keep me up to date with what's going on. The growth of MMA since 2006 when I entered prison is amazing. If someone would have said to me back in 2006 that women will be big stars and earn millions of dollars, I would have never believed it. It just shows you how much the sport has evolved. When asked who his favourite fighters in MMA at the time was, in 2018, Lee Murray said, I like Gegard Mousasi. For me, he's the number one middleweight in the world. He's a very well-rounded fighter and can fight in every position. I used to keep my eye on him back in the day because there was always a chance I could end up fighting him. He's really come on, which I knew he would. You could tell he had the qualities to be a good fighter back then. He also said Michael Venom Page. Michael is from the same camp as me, London Shoot Fighters, and it's a shame I am not there to train with him. He would have been perfect to spar back in 2004 when I was preparing for the Anderson Silva fight. I think Michael has the skills to become a great champion, not just in MMA, but in boxing too. He could become the first man to hold world titles in MMA and boxing. I have to say John Jones as well. He's the best fighter on the planet, with or without steroids. He cleaned up the 205-pound division and needs to go up to heavyweight and take that belt. Oh, he ended up doing that. What is the last thing before you go to sleep? Freedom, that, and being with my family and bringing home that UFC belt, he said. Another interview with Bloody Elbow. Lee Murray was asked about Conor McGregor and what he had done for the sport. When asked about it, Lee Murray said, he has made a great impact. There can be no hiding from the fact that he has done a good job and helped a great deal with the growth of the sport. Having said that, I don't think he has done any more than I would have done if I wasn't imprisoned. When I see him turning up to a fight wearing a white mink coat with tags hanging off it, looking like an EastEnders character Pat Butcher on a night out down the Queen Vic, I would have to say no, he isn't the kind of champion I would have been, and you definitely wouldn't catch me with a Tony the Tiger and King Kong tattooed on my chest either. You would have seen the champion I would have been. Conor can dream of being like me. That's what it would be, a dream. He could never be as confident as me, have the balls the size of mine, or have the skill or power I have. He can pretend to be me, but you'll never see another me, period. While McGregor seems to carry a brash attitude to any fighter who might eventually stand in his way, including past altercations with Habib Nurmagomedov, as well as welterweight champion Tyron Woodley, Murray is quite confident the former two-division UFC champion would keep his calm if they ever came face to face. There is no one in the UFC as fearless or as ruthless as me. I go to limits others wouldn't dream of. Where they end, I'm just the beginning. People know my dreams come directly from my heart. I'm a man to be taken seriously. I'm the real Notorious. There is no one in MMA more notorious than me. I heard there was an online titled The Real Notorious One before Conor McGregor. It's about me. Everyone knows me. I am the real Notorious. Besides, what is he notorious for? What has he done to earn that name besides from throw a few water bottles and wear a bad suit? The combination of the bad suit and the ginger hair makes him look like Krusty the Clown, then Notorious. I was born Notorious. When I was 16 years old and in prison fighting in the prison yard, he was doing his paper round, being tucked in at night by his mummy and daddy. I would have his belt and his name, all in the same night. Murray was then asked what he made of Conor McGregor's boxing match with Floyd Mayweather. It was always going to be a Floyd win, Conor had. A 1 in a million chance, that was about it. Floyd outboxed some of the best boxers in the world and they could hardly touch him. Conor couldn't even beat the best fighters the UFC had to offer, let alone to another sport, and beat the best there. The Russian guy, Habib Nurmagomedov, would maul Conor. So I guess Lee Murray's got some good fight knowledge there because he was correct. Also, Tony Ferguson would beat him. You can't beat that Eddie Alvarez guy and claim to be the best lightweight in the world. If the link between Lee Murray and Conor McGregor seems tenuous, based purely on a penchant for troublemaking, the line that crosses through Murray and Michael Bisping, the former UFC middleweight champion, is of the straighter, truer variety. The two cut their teeth on cage rage shows in the early noughties and would even one day share a common opponent in Jorge Rivera, where Murray burnt brightly and burnt out quickly. Bisping was true to his style, all pecks and prods and self-preservation. and well equipped for the long haul. He stuck around, won some, lost some, but always kept moving forward, which is why in the end, as Murray disappeared from the view, Bisping entered the fray. By 2006, around the time Murray waved goodbye to freedom, he was on track to becoming the British face of the UFC. He was asked, "Did you ever expect Michael Bisping to become UFC middleweight champion?" Lee Murray said, "No, I never thought he would win that belt." Matt Hughes once said, "Anyone can get lucky in once and win a belt. It's defending it that makes a champion. And defending it is something Michael Bisping could not do. Defending means doing it against the next contender in line, not against a 47-year-old man in semi-retirement. I scored that Dan Henderson fight a draw anyway." I'm not taking anything away from Dan Henderson. Dan is a tough motherfucker and a legend of the sport in his day. He would have knocked the shit out of Bisping every time, exactly the way he did the first time they fought. He came up a little bit short, but Dan is an inspiration to still be fighting at the age of 47. He gives people like me hope. Michael has world-class cardio, probably the best in the business, along with a great desire. He's very tenuous. He loves fighting and loves competing, but apart from that, his skills are very limited. He's just okay at everything. Not great at anything. He's not great at jiu-jitsu, he's not a wrestler, and he doesn't have great kickboxing skills. So it was difficult to believe he could go on and win the UFC title. So it seems like from prison, Lee Murray was just building up this hatred for every single fighter that was having success from the UK and Ireland. He was then asked, "Would you have wanted to fight Michael Bisping?" For sure, especially if he had that belt. It would have been the easiest night's work ever. I cornered Mark Epstein for his 2 fights against Michael in Cage Rage. Michael won both, and it was hard to accept watching a friend you have grown up with on the streets, been through wars with and got beat the way he did. It wasn't nice. To fight Michael and get the win back would definitely be something I would have been up for. That bit of the rivalry makes it so much better. Michael knows I am leagues above him, whether he admits it or not, and knows in his heart I'm the real number one in the UK by far. And he would have always reigned second to me if I had not ended up in prison. He would not have achieved what he did if I was still out and about. Dana White gave Michael a lot of chances, and if he would have been there, and if I had been there, he would not have got those chances, which is why it's quite frustrating sitting here knowing the second best man had the belt strapped around his waist. When asked what would have happened if he fought Bisping, Lee Murray says, "I would hit his jaw hard, and his head would hit the floor even harder. I would put him away in round 1, at the latest round 2. My style is a nightmare for Michael. Explosive power punchers like me are a bad match for him." In an article from the 5th of April 2023 by The Mirror, Murray has stated that he wants to win the UFC title as a coach at the age of 57. If he can't fight, he still is planning to return to the MMA once he is released. If he can't fight, then he wants to get the belt in a coaching role. He says, "Fighting's my life, fighting's in my blood. If I'm not in there fighting myself, I'm going to be taking people in there. One way or another, I need to win that UFC title. My story isn't finished yet. This isn't the end." His plan is to open up his own gym in the documentary entitled Catching Lightning. It depends obviously when I get out of here. If I can't fight, then I'm obviously going to still be involved in MMA. There is no way I could live outside and not be involved in MMA. With Lee Murray more than likely getting released when he's 57 years old, it's not certain what his future holds. More than likely being released in 2035 unless a miracle happens. He'll still be involved in fighting in some way or the other, but it is a tragedy that we missed out on what he could have quite literally been the Conor McGregor of his era, and he could have really been big for the sport, but it just seems he was too troubled in his own personal life, and he had too many demons and just too many issues in general with gangs and drugs, and just being an actual gangster is, it's going to make it hard to stay out of trouble. But if Lee Murray would have stayed out of trouble, it is fascinating to think what his career could have been. He had not a super competitive fight with Anderson Silva, but at the time, how Anderson Silva went on the run he did. He gave him some trouble, especially in the second round. Now, I think Silva probably did win every round, but he gave Anderson a tough fight when Anderson was just knocking everybody out. And yeah, like I say, it would have been fascinating to see how Lee Murray's career would have turned out if he didn't have all the problems, if he didn't get stabbed, if he would have survived, well, I mean, he did survive, but, if he didn't get stabbed and have all the issues, and just seems like, and the visa problems, it just seems everything was out to get him, and it just really, at the end, it really screwed him up. But hopefully one day we'll get to see him maybe take a fight against an older veteran or something to get that level of passion out, or we'll see him coaching, and maybe, who knows, maybe Lee Murray will coach a future prospect to a UFC championship. But there's just so much about this guy that's so fascinating that they need to make like a proper film about his life, because there's so much I left out of this that I could just, like, this could have been like a 10-hour video, because there is so much about this guy that's fascinating. Just, he's got an interesting life. The eventual movie about this guy is going to be fascinating. So thanks for listening. Please like, comment, subscribe, and have a good rest of your day.